About after 5 minutes of slides, we'll spend the majority of today's meeting going through different examples within our demo environment. I like to break it up into buckets of use cases. So we have different types of planning use cases, both on the FP&A and sales and operational side of things. And then we also have a very broad set of different types of custom applications. So a little bit more simplistic than planning, but different ways that you can basically augment Power BI reports to give some more value, interactivity, and allowing end users to make updates or explain why variances have taken place, so on and so forth. And then lastly, we will be going over an overview of our newest custom visual release, which is really meant to combine the best worlds of Excel and Power BI. So in between each of those bullet points, I will take a little bit of a breather and just see if there's any questions that have accumulated within the Q&A chat portion of the webinar there. So feel free, as questions come up, you can log them there so you don't have to worry about remembering them for the next pause. And then I'll get to them whenever we're about to switch gears throughout the presentation. So as far as an overview of PowerOn, I like to start with really a why statement. So why do we exist? There's a lot of folks that hear about the initial idea of write back in Power BI, and it concerns them a little bit to start because the traditional thought is we have our actuals being reported on in an automated fashion. We don't want anybody to overwrite that. But when many organizations have found that after they're done, automating reporting from various source systems, the question becomes, what about our reports that either fully or to some extent rely on end user input? So that can be your budgets, your forecasts, any what if scenarios you create, as well as commentary, status updates, so on and so forth. So many organizations still want to be able to report on data reports that are being collected based on end user input, but that has to take place outside of Power BI because it is a read-only platform natively. So that results in just a little bit slower, more reactive, manual and error-prone process. Many organizations will have 20 different versions of each forecast or budget that's being passed around, and they don't really have any auditability or governance or the ability to stop somebody from inserting their own row that really shouldn't live in the structure of their data. So while Excel is great as a financial modeling application, everybody knows and loves it. So it kind of becomes the status quo as far as collecting data, even though it was really never meant to truly be a database application the way that a lot of groups use it. So our product is really meant to give you the interactive ability that you have in Excel, but also the performance and the governance and the security of a backend database, and also the real-time visualizations of Power BI, so that you're able to collect your data, make updates in the same place where it's visualized effectively without having to run back and find the SharePoint list or Excel doc and then waiting for that to reflect within Power BI. And the way that's accomplished is really through our add-on product, which is composed of a suite of write-back enabled and Microsoft trusted custom visuals, along with a back-end write-back engine that would be installed in, anybody that's going to use the product can have it installed directly in their environment. So it is not an external solution of any kind. And you're going to be able to leverage your existing data sources, your existing data models, whether those are analysis services tabular models or Power BI premium data sets. So that's another nice thing about this tool is if an organization is becoming more mature in their use of Power BI, a lot of the quote unquote implementation work, if they want to start incorporating write back, is already done, as you're going to be able to leverage your existing data sets, data sources, and Power BI reports, but add additional write back flair to them using our product. So as I had mentioned previously, common use cases include planning, forecasting, budgeting, really of any kind, as well as more simplistic use cases like status updates, custom applications, maintaining or updating master data, and all different types of commentary and being able to explain variances. We do consider this a product that really can be leveraged throughout an entire organization. Just like Power BI is not only helpful to a finance team or supply chain team, the same goes with our product as a true extension of Power BI's functionality. So as you can see here, each of the use cases listed is in use at a Fortune 100 client of ours in production. These are some of the most common ones that we see, but it's definitely not an exhaustive list. And as you can see here, finance, FP&A, lots of budgeting and forecasting, what if scenarios, hierarchy management, workflows and approvals. but we really see just as much action on the sales and operational and supply chain side of things, as well as pockets of usage throughout HR, IT, and other departments as well. Then, as you saw, many different functional areas, also many different industries. So once again, just like Power BI is very flexible as far as the data that you want to collect, the granularity, where it might be coming from, so on and so forth. Again, the same goes with our tool. So you can see here, not just many different functional areas, but many different industries, whether it's, CPG, heavy manufacturing, aerospace, retail, different food and beverage companies as well, financial services, really any organization that has hitched their wagon to Power BI as the reporting tool of the future is going to come across some use cases, if not dozens of them, where it'd be helpful to be able to update or maintain data directly within the reports. That's all I wanted to cover as far as PowerPoint goes. We will switch gears over into the demo environment for the remainder of today's meeting. As I mentioned, I'm going to focus on different planning use cases and examples to start, and then we'll move into custom applications and wrap things up with Excel. And first and foremost, we can start with just basic introductions of each visual. So right here within this report, you'll see we're using my Microsoft Power BI profile. We're logged in to MicrosoftPowerBI.com. And if I open up the development pane here, I just want to show what it looks like as far as developing a write-back enabled report. Here you can see this is a Power On data entry matrix, and all our visuals are meant to be one-for-one swaps of a standard Power BI equivalent. So once the product's installed, any report where you're already using a matrix can typically just be swapped out for the Power On data entry matrix. And then over here in the data entry field, you have the web service, which is the actual write-back engine that is going to perform the updates to the data source of your choosing. So once that's installed, you'll just be able to copy and paste that link and select via dropdown what type of data source you're going to be writing back to in the use of this report. So that's a quick preview of what it looks like as a developer, as an end user. Of course, this can be governed using role level security, who should be able to read or who should be able to write over which data. But one thing I always like to point out is, especially for planning use cases, we are going to work in versions of data. As I mentioned at the beginning, actuals are always going to remain read-only. We're not going to encourage or enable customers to go and write over what actually happened last year so we can all pretend it went a lot better than it did or anything like that. Instead, you'll be able to create and manage versions of data. Like here you can see I have my budget, and this one is going to be a write-back enabled version of the report. So really on the back end, it's just going to be a simple version or simple data modeling technique where you add a version ID column to the fact table, and then you'll be able to create and manage those different versions of data with the same structure, leaving actuals alone, but being able to collect data for any budgeting, forecasting, or what if scenario purposes. Within this report, I can make updates at any level of granularity that we have visualized. So for example, we have in the individual product SKUs projected sales volume for January here. If I want to update that from 850,000 to 1 million, I can simply type over that. Enter, then save changes, and the write-back engine will do its thing from there. It will only update this value, but it's going to reprocess the affected tables in our data model after updating the data source, and we'll see that the report has refreshed in an average of about 1 to 2 seconds. Now I can also do so at a higher level of aggregation. So if I just want to update my Q1 total for Apple brands, we of course have 3 months going into this value and 2 products rolling up into Apple brands. I can change this from 12.8 to 15 million. Now that roughly 2.3 million unit increase is going to allocate down proportionately based on the pre-existing values. So out of the box, it is going to break back and align with the weighted percentages that we had prior to that update. But you can also have custom allocation logic if you would like to. We also have smart formulas. So if there's anything you want to increase or decrease, multiply or divide, you can use the first 3 letters of that word. So here for my April total, I'll type in INC 10%, and it'll simply do the math for me. And you can see, because I did that total, each of our values for April will increase by 10% as that save is committed. And then one other out-of-the-box feature of the data entry matrix is the ability to do more selective allocations. So maybe I want to increase my July total by 2 million units, but I don't necessarily want that allocating back proportionally across products that we don't expect to perform so well. So instead, I can pick and choose using Control-Click 3 of our best-selling products for that period, hit Set Goal Seek, and then come on down to that total and put in INC 2 million. Hit Save Changes, and then if you keep an eye on those 3 values, they will increase to get us that new total, but none of the other values will change. And then you've also probably noticed the bright red triangles populating some of these cells. So if I hover over that, that means somebody's left a comment, and that comment is actually stored at the row and column intersection or tuple within the data model. And you'll be able to see in the tooltip the user and the comment that they left. Here you can see I explained that we're down 10% because 2 stores closed in Dallas. So not only being able to update these values, have them visualize in real time, but also being able to, attach your thought process or assumptions and making that update at the exact level of granularity where the update was made. And now to show what a role-based experience could look like, as well as to further demonstrate that these live at the row and column intersection, we'll see up here, we have 4 different regional vice presidents that all contribute to this sales volume forecasting exercise. So if I click into Chris Walker, if I'm a member of Chris Walker's team, when I log in, I don't necessarily need to be able to see and edit, the data that rolls up through Ben, Mary, and Helen in this case. With that, you can see we have a different set of comments here, being at new row and column intersections within the data model. And we've been asked by manager to increase our total by 1 million units for the year. We can continue to use any drill down capabilities of Power BI if I want to allocate that down to a particular bottling type and or a particular customer. I can drill down to this subset of data and then make that increase of 1 million units. Now that is going to allocate back only across the values that made it through those filters. So that's going to be bottle, packaging type, and then Aldi customer, and rolling up through Chris Walker's organization. As that save is committed, you'll see standard visuals also update in real time. So Chris Walker's bar chart went up by 1 million here. And then when all the filters are removed, anybody looking at that from the higher level view is going to see the latest and greatest based on all those end user inputs. So it's pretty simplistic to demo from a single end user perspective. But as you can imagine, that means all the different users that contribute to this process can come in simultaneously if they want to, without stepping on each other's toes. And as soon as they make their updates, that is going to naturally consolidate up into the org-wide view and really be ready for any type of drill down, analysis, or investigation that you'd like to do with the standard features of Power BI. And then just to show some of the flexibility of the data entry matrix before moving on to the next visual. Over here, I'll give this one a quick refresh. We'll see that we have this data entry matrix that'll populate right here, set up a little bit differently, where instead of doing monthly sales volumes, we have the total annual quantity that we're expecting for each of our products times the average sales price gets us to our revenue or sales figure. Then we're going to subtract discount amount and cost of goods sold to get us to a margin. So this is another example. It's laid out a little bit differently. This is a DAX expression that is showing us this. And then using the goal seed, we can actually pick and choose different factors to get to a new target margin, for example. So here we can see my cola bottle. I'm planning on selling 32.5 million units and our price is 1.82. I'm going to say I'd like to get that margin to 60 million if possible. I don't want to count on selling more than 32 million units. So I can hit set goal seek on our price and then pump up the margin to 60 million. Save changes and taking these other factors into account, it will come back to me with a new price point updated. So there we can see it went from 1.82 to 1.98. So an increase of 18 cents was able to get us to that target margin. So that is the data entry matrix visual, very commonly used for any application using our product in Power BI where we're going to be collecting and aggregating data. And then we also have drag and drop visuals. So right here, you can see the Save Changes button is a telltale sign that Power On is involved. So this is a drag and drop line chart. And this is set up so it's showing us the percentage of annual sales that is taking place in each month. So now rather than going cell by cell, if I just want to perform a what if scenario, hey, what if we get a lot busier in the summer months than we were originally anticipating? Whatever that may be, I can make those changes on the fly. In this case, we will reallocate our entire plan and still have this visualize with the matrix down here to see what that actually looks like at a more granular level. So we could see in May and June, or May, it's going to be lower, 26 million up to 36 million in June. And then we're going to see a large increase up to 100 million, all the way up to 141 million in September there. So in that case, we were again changing the percentage of annual sales. We didn't mess with our total, but this line really can be set up to be revenue, cost of goods sold, any type of driver or trend that you would like to be able to manipulate. And this is also where versioning comes into play. So a lot of people are going to use the matrix to collect their production level budgets and forecasts. But then you can quickly create a copy of any existing report for what if scenario purposes. So this is the most simplistic way to do so. I'll get into some more sophisticated examples later on. But you can see I can take a copy of any existing report. Maybe I want to start with my actuals, and then we can make a primo what if scenario. Now that's going to create a new version ID, and it's going to populate that version ID with the data that I've chosen from. So in this case, our actuals. But that being said, any changes I make with primo what if as the version that's selected will only impact that version of data. You see that save is complete. I've made a lot of these demos over the last couple of weeks. So we go over primo what if, and now we can make any changes here. Again, we'll be able to compare this with previous versions. We can promote it to being a target if we would like to, but it's not going to impact any other versions. So along with the drag and drop line chart, we also have a drag and drop bar chart. It accomplishes, a similar function from a data manipulation standpoint, but it tends to lend itself better to driver-based modeling. So this is something that a very large food and beverage company wanted to use for their driver-based modeling efforts, where at the top you can select from various assumptions. So we want to see this by the bottling type. We want to include mix effect, which once again means that we're not going to change the total units sold in this case. We're just going to change the percentage allocation. And then we want to include the cost of goods sold effect. So this is going to take into account the different cost of goods sold associated with each bottling type, as well as the different price points. So now I can go through, say, okay, maybe we plan on selling a lot less white glass, a lot more green glass and can. Be able to go through on the fly, make these updates, and then also see the impact on any dependent measures. As I mentioned, sales and costs of goods sold are going to be dependent on how much we sell of each bottling type. So as this save is completed over here, I update my allocations. On the right here, we can see, all right, we didn't change how many units we sold, but we had lower revenue figure because we sold more bottling types with a lower price point. But we also had substantially less cost of goods sold, so we still ended up being more profitable in this case. That's something they can play with several different options and then choose whatever allocation mix they think will be the best for their profitability and align their marketing and distribution efforts with making that happen in real life. All right, so those are our first three custom visuals. We have the 2 drag and drops as well as the data entry matrix. Now we can touch on a couple more finished examples, if you will, after introducing those visuals. So this is what a finished application might look like using Power On and PowerBI. So right here, we just have a standard landing page. This is all regular PowerBI. I'm not going to be able to edit anything directly here. But then if I would like to make some updates, we have a data input button. And this is going to bring me to a similar screen where you can also have a default to have this help bar pop up. If someone's first time coming in, you can give them instructions on the same screen where they're going to be making these updates on how to use the smart formulas, goal seeking, entering comments, etc. Again, similar to the first example, we have our data entry matrix for granular updates or aggregate level updates. And then we also have a drag and drop line chart up here. As you can see, this one is set up so that we're just going to be, updating revenue as we make changes to that. So once again, doesn't have to be percentage based, but it certainly can. And then to show some more of that flexibility, we have revenue, which was financial figures. In this case, we want cost of goods sold to be percentage based. So really any type of metric that you want to bring in to the report, you can use Power On to update those. So now if I'm expecting a little bit lower cost of goods sold over the year, I can make those changes. And on the left, once again, we have dependent measures. So we're going to see if we are able to bring the cost of goods sold by a couple percentage points over a few months, what is that going to look like as far as impacting the profit? So most of their manager, director level people will make their updates to, what they're expecting as far as revenue, expenses, cost of goods sold on the previous screen. And then leadership and executives, they don't necessarily want to get to that level of granularity, but they do want to be able to do some variance reporting as well as some what if analysis in a more simplistic fashion, where you can see we're going to be able to compare a working scenario, which is going to be editable based on the drivers here in this line chart, and then a target scenario. So we can see we're comparing our budget with our actuals. We can see profitability and variance metrics in these little scorecards right here. And then any changes that we make, if we foresee our revenue going up, whatever that may be, once again, we can make those changes. You can have as many bars and drivers as you would like to be able to update included within the report. And same thing goes, the end results that we're most concerned with, we'll be able to see the impact in real time. This report also has, as I mentioned, a more sophisticated way of creating and managing new versions. So you can see down here, we have just a basic status, and this is going to dictate whether it is editable or not. So if we have a new budget or forecast that we're pushing out, we'll have that as active. And then as soon as we collect the inputs for that, we can mark it as closed. There can also be more statuses, and I have a couple other examples that I can show for multi-tier planning experience where we have different users that are able to edit at different points throughout the creation of the report. But just an example of if we want something to be closed down for editing, once it's submitted, that is very much possible with a simple status associated with the version. Additionally, we can also create a version using 2 as a starting point. So if we want to create a reforecast or something of that sort, I could say, all right, I want to take my actuals for the months that have happened so far. For the sake of this demo, we'll just say that is January through March. And then I want to use our original budget to populate the remaining months of April through December. I could say this is going to be a Q2 reforecast, and then it'll give us as a starting point the actuals. The months that we have for actuals will be read only, and then the budget months will be able to be edited so we can update the values that haven't occurred yet. Additionally, every keystroke that is, or any update really, that is done using Power On is auditable. So we'll see here, if I open up the edit pane here, this is going to be using a standard Power BI table. And in our data fields, we have write back history details. That's going to be automatically captured. And then we can present that either in the same report or a separate administrative report using a standard table visual. Same thing goes with any comments, since those are kept at the tuple level. Most groups will have some type of comment summary report where we can see all of the comments that were made within our data entry matrix for this report. And we can even have search bars if we want to search for specific keywords or whatever that may be. So that's one finished example. Here's another, as I mentioned, a multi-tiered experience, just showing some of the different ways folks might want to lay this out. So at the top left of this report, we actually have all the comments being summarized in the same page of the report that we see the data entry matrix visual and updates are being made. We also have buttons here if we want to plan by quantity, US dollars, or average sales price. And this one has the multi-tiered example where we do planning at the corporate level, country level, and then product level. If we get down to the product level, you'll see that we can also have buttons for paying by quantity, US dollars, or the local currency. This also shows the role-based access. This organization sells a lot more than a dozen products, but the only ones that are going to be visible to me here are the products being sold in a particular country that I am responsible for planning in, and which roll up to your particular business unit. Since they have a couple extra steps to their process, they plan at the product level, so they go bottom up. Product level, that gets passed to the country level, and then all the way up to the corporate level for final approval. So here's where they manage their scenarios. They have actuals, budgets, and then the last best estimate. That's a monthly reforecasting process that was too cumbersome for them to do purely in Excel and actually get them out on a monthly basis. So that's the primary use case for our product. And then they have 3 statuses. So during initial, that means folks that sit in the product level are going to be able to make their initial inputs for that period. They're closest to the sales that are going to be taking place. Then it gets passed up to the country level and it switches to under review, at which point only sales and finance leadership at the country level are going to retain right access and be able to make changes to that. And then lastly, it is pushed up to the corporate level where they can mark it as finalized, and it becomes a read-only report for everybody, used solely for variance and historical reporting purposes going forward. And then while we talk about variance reporting purposes, here is one other finished example. Very similar. I think you get the gist as far as the data entry matrix and planning at different levels. We have the business unit, profit center, and project level in this case. But just like to touch on the compare versions tab here. So you can imagine if I am somebody that is responsible for going in, and let's just say I need to approve of our February version of the forecast, I might want to compare that to the version that we submitted last month and see if there's any glaring differences. So this is actually all standard Power BI. It is visualizing data that was collected in a consistent manner using Power On, but no write-back enabled visuals on this page. So we can see the side-by-side comparison. February is the navy blue, bright green is January, and then a red line highlighting the version variance. So I can drill into that where it peaks. Here we can see in July. And then right off the bat, I further investigated data and analytics profit center. It looks like that number quadruples. That might be something I want to go back and actually take a look at where the planning was done before I go ahead and say, okay, this report is good to go. So now within the same report, a different button within it, I can select my February version, and then I'm looking for a large number rolling up through data and analytics profit center. In the month of July, luckily right off the bat here, we see 150K. That's about the size of the variance. And we do have a comment explaining that we received approval to add 500 licenses to a software subscription renewal. So just showing the reduction in the amount of, running back and forth forensic work that you might have to do. Did somebody accidentally add an extra 0, or was this an intended, with the ability to collect the data in a consistent manner, have it reported on in the same place, and also being able to do variance reporting and having the commentary to explain certain types of changes that can go a long way towards time savings. And then most of those are more so on the financial side of things, at least the last couple finished examples. So this is just on the sales and operational planning side of things, where we have our demand quantity and also showing a little bit more of the flexibility of the data entry matrix, where we have demand quantities, and then that's simply going to take our opening inventory into account and have that or demand quantity subtracted from that, and then our supply quantity. So in this case, people on the demand planning side of things can go in and say whatever they think they're going to see as far as updates. And then if and when those updates result in our balance going negative, that's going to become abundantly clear, so they can get in contact with the supply team to try to remediate that or get some more product units on hand to meet that demand. All right, so this is our first couple examples I wanted to go through as far as some of the planning examples, both on the financial planning side of things as well as sales and operational planning. I am not seeing any specific questions in the Q&A side, so we can keep things moving onto the custom applications. These are typically going to be much more simplistic in nature. And really the primary difference is in the planning examples, we're usually writing back or interacting with measures. So Power BI measures. In this case, with the table editor, we're usually going to be just updating individual rows within a database. So you can see here, same thing goes. This is a one-for-one swap of the table, and this is the Power On Table editor. With this product, we're going to have some more out-of-the-box functionality and ability to govern what can take place in each column. So we can see we have a toggle bar for deciding if each column is going to be visible or hidden to end users. Same thing goes, toggle bar for whether it's going to be read-only or editable. And then we have a drop-down list here for column type, which is going to govern, once again, what type of interactions are possible within each column. So we have a lot of customers that had very simplistic write-back needs. I want to update a status. I want to hit a checkbox. I want to leave a comment. And those types of applications can quite literally be built in a day or two and push out to production if these columns already exist within a SQL fact table that we can connect to. So now you can see this is an example of the selection. So a drop-down list of predetermined options where you don't have the ability to free type something in and potentially mess up the way that the data rolls up. You can update the dates or dates and times via drop-down lists as well. Here you can have rich text commentaries, so numbered lists, bold italics, whatever that may be to get your point across. And then quantity and price are, of course, numerically defined. So if I go in and type a letter, some simple built-in validation logic letting me know that that is not going to work because it doesn't align with the column type. Two most common use cases that we see for the table editor visual are going to be what I broadly call exception reporting and then maintaining master data. So here's an example of an exception report. And what I mean by that is many folks have different Power BI reports that are meant to identify unfavorable variances that are based on some type of data-driven event. So this is a simplistic example over at ExxonMobil where they have purchase orders that go past a certain due date, and they just want to understand why that's taking place, when they can expect it to come to resolution. So the records or the rows are filtered into this report based on being past a specific due date. In their case, it was 2 weeks past due. And now, as a procurement manager, Kristen can log in, quickly filter down to all the POs that she's responsible for that made it onto this exception list. And all she needs to do is attribute a reason code to management, narrowed it down to the top 3 reasons they think this is happening, and then unknown reason as a catch-all for all the others. And as she makes those simple updates, management is then going to have the valuable information of, okay, how much total contract value is being held up by each reason code that we have laid out here to really guide where they should be putting their continuous improvement efforts. And then we have commentary and description for free text entry. And you can even use this checkbox here to send an automated email to our manager, letting her know that this has been updated. Another very similar example over at Coca-Cola, where instead of overdue POs, this is going to be vendor data quality issues. So in this case, there's different levels of people within the organization. The error stewards come in, and same thing goes. They just have to say, all right, we have a reason code here. This is why it occurred. And then they say whether it's fixed or not, and then have comments available here. As you can see, we have an approval as the last column, and that becomes grayed out for me. So that's actually going to be based on the user permission. Certain people are able to make the updates to these columns, and then their manager is able to actually set it as approved. And those types of user access rights are actually managed, can be managed directly within the same tool or within a different administrative report, where you can see the different emails. Here you can see mine, evanf@poweronbi.com. I have contributor access, so I'm not able to update the approval one. Then here's one more exception reporting example where we're actually using a standard Power BI matrix to visualize different financial figures. So we have what we projected as final revenue, projected cost, so on and so forth. And then we have some that might be flashing red, yellow, or green based on conditional formatting and the conditions that we have set up there. So now when something's flashing red, we don't just know, okay, that's bad. We can also have our end users that are responsible for this figure or closest to the reasons that may have happened, document why they think it occurred, and being able to bring these things to resolution. And you can see within the tooltip, we have a full audit log of one user going in, tagging their colleague, asking for additional details on this figure, and then eventually having explained it was due to an unexpected maintenance cost and marked as resolved. So in this example, if you want to add your own comment to any of these, you can touch this little comment bar up here, or at the bottom left rather, and then the table editor will pop up where you can attach additional commentary, update the status, which has an automatically assigned icon, and assign it to a colleague within the report if you would like to. And like I've showed previously with audit logs, everything that we do, you can also report on using standard Power BI visuals. So a lot of groups will use for commentary applications, at least something like this as a landing page where we actually have analytics around the comments that are being added. So if I'm Michael Murata, I might want to only look at comments that are assigned to me for a particular business unit that are unresolved. And now I can see a summary of all those that are needing my attention and just use the simple drill through to actually get to that figure and add my update if I would like to. All right, and then here's a quick data management example. This is another thing that's a pretty simplistic process on paper, but it can take quite a while to actually make these types of updates. So if an organization goes through mergers or acquisitions, or they want to introduce new product SKUs all the time, getting those things mapped correctly in the reporting hierarchies can be a very time-consuming task, because the people that usually know where they belong typically aren't the same people that know how to write a database statement. So that was certainly the case at this oil company, where they would acquire a company and have new product SKUs like a Z-type hydraulic fishing jar part, and they have no idea, on the finance and BI side of things, where that is supposed to belong from a product segment, family, and product line perspective. In their case, the guy does know that information, walks around on an oil field with a hard hat on all day, so it's not very easy to get those inputs from him. So it was SharePoint lists, phone calls, emails, meetings, so on and so forth. Now, in this case, Glenn, if something gets assigned to him, he gets a notification, and he knows this information off the top of his head, and we can make those selections via dropdown and send that back to the finance and BI teams for their review. All right, so that wraps up what I wanted to cover as far as some of the custom application examples after the planning. Now we can finish off the demo portion of today's meeting, last but not least with Power Excel. So one thing I do want to make clear is this is not leveraging, Excel, the desktop application in any way. It's really meant to be a replica of Excel. So still using the same write back engine, and we're using a Power On custom visual. We have a lot of the similar features. We have our data entry field, and then we have column properties for deciding what should be able to take place broadly in each column. Along with all those standard features that we've been providing for a couple of years now, you get a true Excel embedded within Power BI experience. So any process today that's taking place in Excel, you can quite literally import your existing Excel template to bring over the data, to bring over the formatting, the formulas, and have the same exact look and feel within a write back enabled report, and still get away from all the pitfalls of collecting data purely in Excel. Additionally, you really can do anything that you're used to being able to do from an Excel ribbon perspective. So getting the formatting exactly the way you want it. This is big for finance teams that want their bold, italics, double underlined all in the same column. That's very difficult to do in Power BI today. Now it makes it easy as getting a couple of clicks for getting the stylization that you would like within any write back enabled or read only report. Of course, we have the Excel formulas that can be used both from an developer perspective, if you want to calculate column but don't necessarily want to go writing a DAX measure for everything. Here you can see our volume column right here is our quantity times unit price, G8 times H8. Of course, other features, data validation, the ability to format our cells and lock down certain functions. So if I want to protect the sheet or lock cells, you can do so simplistically via checkbox here. that was as a developer. As a end user, you can see we have the familiar features of being able to Control C, Control V, as well as go in, drag to fill, make our updates via drag bars, whatever that may be. So that's one thing that was common feedback from our customers. Our visuals are pretty easy, pretty simplistic to use, but end users still just feel so comfortable in Excel. So this is really meant to give them the best of both worlds. You can use the UI, UX that you've been familiar with and kind of fling to whenever new technology has been introduced over the last couple of years, but we can still get away from the many different things that can go wrong when we are collecting data in a financial modeling application. And then here's an example where you might want to use a client-side Excel formula. So if I want my February value for this financial planning example to equal January times 1.1, I can apply that to the cell and then drag to fill that over. Here's another example where that could be useful, where this is kind of like a combination of being able to do planning updates as well as the exception reporting that I mentioned previously. So this is a price updating example where we have different customers and we sell them different products at certain quantities. And we're going to be looking at the current price. So over the last year, that's what we've been charging them. And our current sales is obviously just those two multiplied. And with inflation, a lot of groups are doing across the board price increases. So now the representatives responsible for each of these accounts can go in and for each automatically suggested new price, say, okay, yes, that new price is fine. Or if they want to reject that new price for any reason, they can once again leverage Excel formulas. Here I'll say our adjusted new price should equal our current price times 1.05. And then I can go on to explain or use the reason code. So once again, they're going to be able to bucket why we're deviating from the automatically suggested new price based on contractual reasons, price being too low, inflation, whatever that may be. Here I can say contractual reason and use free text commentary if I want to explain that we are, based on our contract, we shouldn't be increasing the price by more than 5% in a given year. All right, and I believe we are coming up on time. We have a couple other Power Excel examples. We do have plenty of these things on our website. I can also set up anybody that's interested with a link to a public-facing demo environment. But I do see a couple questions here, and we're almost at time, so I want to address those for sure. So can certain fields be locked and controlled in a visual? So yes, absolutely. That is typically going to be done using the column properties. So within the Power Excel table or the standard table editor that I showed here, right off the bat, you are able to say whether it is going to be read-only or editable. So right here, for each column, you can say, okay, this one's read-only, this one should be editable. Like in this example, we don't want to be able to update any of these values. It's fixed, the purchase order number, the date that was supposed to be due, so on and so forth. But we are able to update these based on the column types that we have attributed to them. So you have those, and then you can also use write security measures if you want to lock down specific columns within the data entry matrix as well, which a lot of groups will use if they are doing their rolling forecast and they don't want people to be able to update the months that have already been that have already occurred and that we have pulled our actuals over for. So I can pull up a quick example of that as well. Right here, you can see these are grayed out as well. So January, February, March, if I select on any of these cells and slam on my keyboard with all my might, it's not going to let me update that. But any of the months that haven't been updated, I will be able to. Or I'm sorry, that haven't been actualized rather. And then the visual settings, it's just what we call a write security measure. All things that can be configured within the report as well. And then the next question was confirming multiple users can edit, update a report. Yep, that's exactly correct. Honestly, if there's only one user that needs to make updates, it might not be the end of the world if they're doing it in Excel. Exporting Excel, making their changes. Really, when those are being passed around through many different people, being manually consolidated, that's when the data collection at scale becomes a pretty large problem that groups are going to be interested in solving. So most of the use cases are going to be primarily applicable if it's going to be multiple users updating a report, and then using role level security or user permissions, as I showed in some of the examples, you can really lock down who's able to edit what to kind of limit how much people are overwriting their own values, along with the auditing and version control features that I showed. With that said, do want to be cognizant of everybody's time. I will throw my email in the chat bar here, so feel free to copy and paste that down if you want to shoot me any questions. Talk further about a specific use case where you think this type of thing might be helpful, or get access to a public-facing demo environment of ours. Please feel free to reach out to me directly, and of course, feel free to reach out to Rob as well. As Prima is definitely our go-to partner as far as the APAC region is concerned.
Well, Evan, I guess if there's no more questions, we can wrap up there. I guess I will be in touch with the people who attended today shortly anyway, just with an email, just to get their feedback and see if they request any further information also. But thanks, Evan, for a great presentation. It's a great product, and you did a great job on the presentation as well. So thank you very much for that. And I guess we'll leave it there. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, everyone. Take care.